So, yeah. Okay, so this is my presentation on the breakup of former Yugoslavia. My name is Sylvia Roper, and I study political science and contemporary European studies here at UNC. So I'm a double major, and I also have a minor in history. I focus on Europe, if you couldn't tell with my classes. And I studied abroad in the former Yugoslavia, in the Balkans, as well as in Austria, and I'm going to Germany this next fall. I'm also a dual citizen between the US and Hungary, so I just listed like different places that I've traveled, and both of these pictures are from Austria because I really like Austria, so figured they might be relevant, especially if we do the Q&A at the end with Austria as one of the countries. So, does anybody, okay, can you see this? Oh, okay, sorry. Has anyone heard of the former Yugoslavia? Or, like, you can raise your hand if you have or not. It's like an interesting country, I suppose, not super popular. Does anyone know which continent it was on? Okay, so it was on Europe. It was in Europe, Eastern Europe particularly, in the Balkans. And there are like a lot of different countries that came out of former Yugoslavia because it was divided into different republics. So yeah, I'm just gonna go on. Oops. Okay, so I just included a couple of pictures of like different places in former Yugoslavia. This is a picture of Sarajevo in Bosnia, which we'll be talking a lot about today. These are a couple of pictures from Bosnia as well. But going back to Sarajevo, real quick. So it's a city that has all different types of ethnicities in it. In Bosnia, Bosnia is comprised of mainly Bosniak Muslims, or Bosnian Muslims, which they created as an ethnic identity during the Cold War, Serbs, and Croats. So all these different types of people live together, and it's known as the Jerusalem of the West because it's so diverse religiously and in ethnic terms. And it's a really nice city. They have all types of things to do there. They have cathedrals and churches as well as mosques, so you can hear like church bells ringing at the same time as like the calls to prayer for like Muslims to go to the mosque. So pretty cool. And then these are two other parts of Bosnia. Some of these are my pictures, some of them aren't. So the one on the left here is Mostar, which is a Croat Bosniak city in the south of Bosnia. So it's mainly Catholics and Muslims who live there, and it's like divided, segregated basically. They don't really mix together, but they both live in the city. And then on the right is Banja Luka, which is the capital of the Republika Srpska, which is where Bosnian Serbs live. And I know that this is pretty complicated, unfortunately, former Yugoslavia is, but I'll try to break it down for you. So this is from Croatia. Dubrovnik is here on the left, which is one of their like popular tourist destinations, beautiful place. And the other one is Zagreb, which is the capital of Croatia. And these countries were all involved in the breakup of former Yugoslavia in pretty significant ways. This is Serbia. These are both pictures from the net because I haven't been there, but this is Belgrade, the capital, and then this is like the countryside. So you can see that they're all kind of similar. Okay, and then lastly, this is Kosovo. This was taken in Pristina, which is the capital. It's a relatively modern place, industrialized, very industrial. Kosovo is an interesting place because it's a part of Serbia, or former part of Serbia, and not everyone recognizes Kosovo as a country around the world. And then this is a picture of another divided city called Mitrovica in northern Kosovo. So half the city is comprised of Kosovar Albanians. And the northern part is mainly Serbs who live there, and the Serbs don't recognize Kosovo as a country, whereas the Kosovar Albanians do. And so they don't really talk to each other or like communicate because it's just very like, has a lot of animosity in the relationship, yeah. And so in order to basically show solidarity while still being divided, they built a peace park, which is basically on a pedestrian bridge. This park where no one ever crosses over, but basically like you can't drive over it anymore. So it's like a symbol of really the tension there, even though it's named a peace park. And then this down here is just an Orthodox monastery called Grajnica in Kosovo. This is rural Kosovo, just to give you guys some pictures of like the land is very geographically beautiful. A lot of mountains, a lot of really nice rivers and lakes. And just last but not least, this is a picture of Macedonia, which is also a contested area. This is in Skopje. The person on the top here is suspected to be Alexander the Great because he's from Macedonia. But Greece also has a feud with Macedonia because they do not want like Macedonia to go by the name of Macedonia because they claim to have like Macedonia a part of their country. So they call it, or they make it Macedonia call themselves the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. So just a lot of tension. But here is a picture of the former Yugoslavia. They had 6 republics, and most of these are countries now. So Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia, Macedonia, and Montenegro were all the republics. And at the republic level, there was quite a bit of power. And then there were 2 autonomous provinces, both in Serbia. One was Vojvodina, which is primarily composed of Serbs and a large Hungarian minority. And the other one is Kosovo, which I've already shown you some pictures of, Pristina, and only the northern part is occupied by Serbs, where the rest are mainly ethnic Albanians. And they were both in Serbia. So and this was not done like by accident, but I'll tell you guys about it in a minute. And so this country of the former Yugoslavia was composed of different religions. There's mainly Serb Orthodox Christianity, Catholicism, and Islam. But of course, there are also Jews who live there and different people of different faiths, as well as ethnicities. And some would say languages. So technically, all these countries speak, except Slovenia and Macedonia, speak Serbo-Croatian, but with different dialects and accents. And in order to keep like themselves separated still, they say that it's different languages, but they're really all like the same. The Serbs just use the Cyrillic alphabet, and the Bosniaks and the Croatians use like the normal alphabet. Okay, so sorry, I feel like I'm kind of rushing through this, but there's a lot to say. So early history, there's actually 3 Yugoslavias, but all in the same area. So the first Yugoslavia was created at the Paris Peace Conference after World War I, because in World War I, or during that time, the Austro-Hungarian Empire had like annexed it as a territory. Actually, World War I began, or is said to have begun, because ethnic Serb Gavrilo Princip shot the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Franz Ferdinand. So it's kind of an important link, and it was done in Sarajevo in the first picture I showed you. But the official name of Yugoslavia was given in 1929, and then the second Yugoslavia was established after World War II, and this is the one we're mainly going to talk about, as well as the third Yugoslavia. And so the third Yugoslavia was not communist, but it was during 1990s. So this man is very important. His name is Josip Broz Tito, and he is a Croat ethnically. He was born in 1892, served in World War I and World War II. In World War I, he was a soldier for the Austro-Hungarians, and he was captured in Russia. But during that time, he became a communist and converted to Bolshevism, which was like the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, communism. But he's really important for Yugoslavia. Basically, the second Yugoslavia is his creation, and World War II and his regime are the most like well-known things about him. So Tito is a very important figure. During the Second World War, he successfully led the communist partisans. So these were like paramilitary fighters in the fight against the Axis powers. So he was very opposed to fascism because he was communist, and just like the fascists were opposed to communism. But he was able to lead this multi-ethnic communist party partisans to victory. And so this gave him political legitimacy. So the people started to see him as like a figure that they could be united under. And then he became the leader of the second Yugoslavia after World War II. Now, Stalin also during that time was like known as the leader of like the whole communist regime after World War II in Eastern Europe, and of course in the Soviet Union and the Soviet republics. But Tito, however, because he came to power himself through this communist partisan victory, he was seen as the leader of Yugoslavia rather than Stalin. So Stalin didn't have as much influence over him. And so at first, Tito admired Stalin a lot, but actually they started to quarrel because Tito wanted to have an independent way of ruling, particularly in foreign policy matters. So he was much more open to like the West and Western influence in a way than Stalin was. And so they had a split. So Tito's key slogan, and the key slogan of the Communist Party of Yugoslavia, was brotherhood and unity. So basically ethnicity wasn't really like important. It was suppressed, and people who were nationalists were punished. And that's when Muslims, like Muslim became an ethnic identifier. So the people who lived in Yugoslavia who were Muslims were just known as Muslims, even though it's like a religious identifier as well. So Tito is known as having a questionably soft dictatorship. It was definitely a totalitarian style of ruling. He had absolute power, but there was like a lot of, it was very different than Stalin and different than the leaders of the Soviet Union, who really like kept an iron grip. So for one, the people in Yugoslavia had free movement. They could travel outside of the country. They could travel within the country. It was relatively open. Artistic freedom was allowed to an extent. There was censorship, but it wasn't to the extent of like the Soviet Union. The republics of Yugoslavia had greater powers than maybe one would expect, especially as time went on. It was a very decentralized system, which meant that the power was rested within the republics rather than the federal government, where like Tito was. There was this idea of socialist self-management, so people and the workers could kind of manage themselves. It was, again, more like individualized in a way. However, dissent was eliminated, and there was still like a totalitarian aspect to his rule. So he died in 1980, and he was the main unifier of the people. And so after his death, things started to heat up a bit. So these are just a couple of pictures of him. He was military leader, and he also was known as a man who stood up to both Hitler and Stalin successfully, which was a pretty big deal. And that gave him a lot of political might, I guess. So in the 1974 Constitution of Yugoslavia, it was very important because it gave a lot more independence and sovereignty to the republics within Yugoslavia. So these countries, they're countries today, but the republics of the time, like Bosnia and Serbia, they were given a lot more powers in comparison to the federal government. So basically everything except like military and foreign affairs were given to the local republics. So during that time, the central government weakened. There's a collective presidency with Tito as like the person above it, but after Tito's death, there was just this collective presidency, and it didn't do very much. So the republics started to pursue their own agendas, and they wanted their own legitimacy, like the people, the politicians there. So local governments became a lot more important than the federal government. And ethnic tensions started to resurface because this brotherhood and unity thing didn't really hold out after Tito died. So after this happened, during the time like when the Cold War was ending and the Communist Party of Yugoslavia really collapsed, especially in 1990, ethnic homogeneity, or having like a country just with one nation represented, was seen as a path to security. However, Yugoslavia had all types of ethnicities, and they were spread out everywhere. So this was a major problem. So how would you create that ethnic homogeneity? Well, nationalism was the instrument of that. And one of the problems was that like one national majority in a republic, like let's say Serbs, could be a minority in another. So like in Bosnia, the Serbs were the minority, but they have a republic that's representing them. So it's very complicated. So the first free elections were held in 1990, where Milosevic, who I will tell you about in a minute, and Franjo Tudjman won as the presidencies of Croatia and Serbia. However, Milosevic really started this use of nationalist rhetoric around Yugoslavia because he told Serbs in Kosovo that they would be defended against Kosovar Albanians because the Serbs claimed that they had been persecuted, and he told them famously that they would not be beaten again. And that's kind of the that went against party policy, the Communist Party, in 1987. But basically, he was able to use this, and other politicians like latched onto it. So the one up here on the top left is Slobodan Milosevic, and he is the Serb president, especially during this time. And he said that the loss of national identity is the greatest defeat a nation can know, and it is inevitable under the contemporary form of colonization. And so basically speaking out against like nationalism not being a like key identifier for the people. This is Franjo Tudjman, who died in 1999. And so he stayed in power until his death in Croatia for 9 years. These two figures are very important, but all these people are important, so that's why they're up here. And they're to give you names to faces, or faces to names, sorry. This is Alija Izetbegovic, who is the president of Bosnia and Herzegovina when the wars broke out. He's a Bosniak Muslim. And this is Radovan Karadzic, who became the leader of the Bosnian Serbs during the war. So here's when war starts kicking out, I guess. And this is a picture in Sarajevo of a Bosniak cemetery. So there are all types. There are all types of cemeteries and places of remembrance in Bosnia and different parts of the former Yugoslavia. But this one is a Muslim cemetery, and Muslims, I think, made up the highest death toll during the war. So the notorious characteristic of the Yugoslav war was ethnic cleansing, which is a process of a policy of elimination of different ethnic groups or religious groups that you don't want. This can be done through forceful displacement or mass murder, deportation, or even by the threat of such acts. So the intent is to create a territory inhabited by just one one homogeneous ethnicity or religion or like culture, or people of the same history or culture. So this meant that people, or that the ethnicities within former Yugoslavia wanted to create ethnically homogeneous places. Like the Serbs wanted like a place for just the Serbs. Bosniaks were, hoping for a place for just the Bosniaks. Croats for just the Croats, etc. And with this, they wanted to take the territory that the people who were the minorities of other republics, they wanted to take that with them and add to their states. So this created a major problem because then it's also a battle of territory, which is obviously an issue. So with the breakup of Yugoslavia, it started with 1991, the summer of 1991, where Slovenia and Croatia, these two republics over here, which were the most Slovenia was the wealthiest republic, and these were the most westward looking republics. They declared their independence. So they just said that they were not going to be a part of the former Yugoslavia anymore. But the international community didn't really acknowledge this, and the former Yugoslavia was mad about it too. So by this time, Yugoslav army was really not happy about this declaration either. And Slobodan Milosevic was also the leader of Yugoslavia. So he was the leader of Serbia, but also the leader of Yugoslavia. And so the Yugoslav army was sent there, but the fighting lasted only 10 days. Even so, some people died, and it was unfortunate, but I guess Slobodan Milosevic had made a deal with the president of Slovenia and basically said that it's okay for it to be let go. Because it's mainly ethnically homogeneous anyway. Now in Croatia, however, there were different Serbs who lived there, such as in Krajina, and so in Vukovar, and so this was a major problem. So Serbia wanted to take that territory that they lived in to recreate this greater Serbian kingdom that they had. And then during this time, Macedonia declared their independence peacefully, so they were able to get away. Serbs were afraid, who lived in Croatia, they were afraid of the Croat nationalism that was heating up, because during World War II, Croats had a genocide of the Serbs, and the president, Franjo Tudjman, basically said that that didn't happen. Major problem. And then in Serbia, Milosevic and the leaders of the Serbs were saying that they would protect their like Serb minorities around Yugoslavia. So the Yugoslav army became the Serb army during that time, and the war between Croatia and Yugoslavia, i.e. Serbia, began. And so after Yugoslavia, or after the Yugoslav army seized different towns, Croatia's small army fought them at Vukovar and were able to cast them away. But the Serbs began to use ethnic cleansing, which is this process, again, of wanting to eliminate people, whether by forcible displacement or mass murder, or threats of that. And Croats also use this method. And then the Serbs began to attack Dubrovnik, though they never were able to get it. So this is a picture of Vukovar after the fighting in 1991. And then in 2016, you can see it's relatively rebuilt, but this is in Croatia as well. Now, Bosnia and Herzegovina is the more like discussed war or fighting during this time, and it's more complicated, so I'll try my best to explain this. So it's a three-sided war. As seen in this map, there's a lot of different ethnicities living there. So there were Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks. So all kind of together. And as you can see today, it's also very ethnically mixed as well. But Bosnia, around the same time that Slovenia and Croatia had their Declaration of Independence, and when the war was already starting, Bosnia also had a referendum for independence, and they were recognized by the international community because the president, President Izetbegovic, who I showed you before, wanted the international community to recognize it because he figured that there might be a war in Bosnia because of this independence. However, the Bosnian Serbs who wanted to remain in Yugoslavia to create this greater Serbia, because by this point, the former Yugoslavia was only Montenegro and Serbia, and they're both like allied. They wanted to remain in Yugoslavia, so they attacked Sarajevo, which is the capital. And they were surrounded basically around the hills, because Sarajevo means like palace in the valley in Serbo-Croatian. And so the Serbs occupied the high areas, whereas the rest of the people who lived in Sarajevo were in kind of the capital. So they could lay siege to it pretty easily. So one of the major, okay, so this war went on for a while, and it was kind of stagnating during 1992, 1993, because it was just, you know, there were attacks and kind of no one was getting ahead. And the international community didn't really know what to do because there were three sides and all of them were committing atrocities, so they didn't know who to side with. But in 1994, the Croats and the Bosniaks signed a peace deal. So they joined forces and started to try to push against Serbia, or the Bosnian Serbs. And then also in 1994, the Bosnian Serbs again attacked Sarajevo, but they did it at a marketplace, and mainly civilians died. Over 60 people did, and around 200 were wounded. And so this was a major news story, and the international community was angry about it, but they didn't really know how to try to stop it and intervene. So the UN and other international organizations, of course, tried to come to like aid the situation, but it was made up of member states who didn't really have any vital interests in the area. There was no like major natural resource. It didn't really affect anybody. So there's kind of this dilemma of like collective action, like of a bystander effect, where, you know, if you feel like someone's going to do it, someone else is going to intervene for you, but like the costs were also like really heavy. So people didn't really know what to do in these other countries around the world. So the UN declared 6 safe areas where there would be no fighting in Bosnia, and their their military arm, or maybe like armed force, I don't know how to describe them, but UNPROFOR came to distribute humanitarian aid during this time. And so, however, there was a place called Srebrenica that was also a safe area, and it was a primarily Bosniak place, and it was staffed or armed with maybe like 500 Dutch soldiers for UNPROFOR. And at night, the Bosnian Serbs attacked the city. They took some of these Dutch troops or soldiers of UNPROFOR hostage, and they started to ethnically cleanse the city. So they like cast out, forcefully tried to displace these people who lived there, who are mainly Bosniaks, and like occupied it themselves. And these people started to flee towards a base, and it was like an airfield called Potocari. And unfortunately, the Bosnian Serbs held this place, which they didn't realize. And so when this happened, they committed it was the biggest genocide since World War II, where more than 8,000 people, mainly boys and men of all ages, were killed on the spot. And because of this, this I guess event, Srebrenica is known as one of the biggest failures of the UN ever. And then NATO had used the Air Forces in 1994, but they became more concentrated in their airstrikes in 1995 against the Bosnian Serbs, and finally they came to the negotiation table because of this. Whoops, sorry. And then the peace treaty for Bosnia was signed in late 1995, but it was the presidents of the country who did it. So the presidents of the different countries, so of Serbia, Milosevic, Bosnia, Begovic, and Tudjman for Croatia. And it was facilitated in Dayton, Ohio. So fun fact, I guess, if you're ever in Dayton, Ohio. But this peace agreement created Bosnia that was divided into two entities. One is the Serb-dominated Republika Srpska, and then the Croat-Bosniak Mixed Federation, which is made up of cantons. And then there's a collective presidency with 3 presidents of each constituent people, or these 3 ethnicities mainly. And then after this war ended, different leaders were suspected of or were convicted of war crimes. So Milosevic actually died in The Hague because he was serving a sentence for war crimes. And the man Karadzic that I showed you earlier, who was the leader of the Bosnian Serbs, just got convicted recently in 2016, and he's serving a 40-year sentence. So after Bosnia, and this is the last slide about war, I promise. I know it's very complicated and a lot, but after Bosnia, Kosovo, where this whole kind of situation took place when Milosevic said you will not be beaten down to the Serbs living there, Kosovo decided that it did not want to be a part of Serbia anymore. It was an autonomous province. It had relative independence, so it decided to secede from Serbia. Now, in the Serb collective memory, the Battle of Kosovo Polje was really important, which took place in Kosovo. It's like the Battle of Kosovo Plain. So the Ottomans were against the Serbs, and the Serbs lost, which meant that they basically lost their empire at that time. But this was a very important site for them historically. Kosovo, as mentioned before, is divided between 2 ethnicities, mainly Serbs, which are represented in the purple, and Albanians, who are Kosovar Albanians, who are represented by the red. So you can see it's primarily Albanians. And these are Muslim Albanians, and these are Orthodox Christian Serbs. So Kosovo called for independence in 1995, I think, but it was peacefully protesting in the beginning. Then they founded the Kosovo Liberation Army in 1996, and tensions just kept escalating until war began in 1998. But the war ended because the international community took action more quickly, and NATO conducted airstrikes on Serbia and Belgrade in order to get them to stop what was going on. And at this time, Milosevic was still the president of Serbia. And then Serbia and Montenegro also split up, and so Yugoslavia was officially dissolved into its republics, as states. And then in 2008, Kosovo became a separate state. So it is now a country, though not all countries, such as Serbia and its ally Russia, do not recognize it. But the US and other places, mainly in Western Europe, recognize it as a country. So just as a recap, this is the former Yugoslavia in 2008. This is Slovenia, which seceded first. Croatia, where the war actually started. Bosnia, where there was the most ethnic cleansing that took place. Montenegro, which was allied with Serbia during the war. Serbia, which had the 2 autonomous provinces, and Kosovo, which became a country, which seceded, and then Macedonia, which kind of got away without any major problems. So why is the breakup of the former Yugoslavia so important? Well, there are a lot of different reasons to that. It's something, first of all, that isn't really touched on in K through 12 education, I think, history courses. I didn't really learn about it when I was in high school, but it's really important. That doesn't mean that it's not important. So The unique challenges that this country faced included the rise of nationalism. So we can see that it's a very important thing and that it's a dangerous thing. And it's pretty relevant to what's going on in different places in different parts of the world today, as there's been a lot of a transition to nationalism. Ethnic cleansing and genocide were committed in this war, which was the first time since World War II, and it was horrendous, and the international community was just surprised by it, and no one really understood what was going on. And this also genocide happened in Rwanda as well, which was in the 1990s as well, which was a crisis. And then the independence, declarations of independence led to war, which of course had led to war in the past when the US, declared independence from Great Britain. There was the Revolutionary War, but it wasn't as violent or brutal as this war was. So the unique challenge, I guess, and the unique parts of this war in the former Yugoslavia was that it was just so violent and so brutal, and there was just so much tension, and there's still a lot of tension. So just a quick ending point. During the 20-year anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide, which took place in 1995, in 2015, all these different leaders of the world came together, like President Bill Clinton, who was president during the time of this war. The US was there. And then also the Prime Minister of Serbia, who was once a part of Milosevic's government, but is now a very much pro Western politician, was paying his respects. And this crowd, which was made up of tens of thousands of people, many of them survivors of this situation, or who family members of people of the victims, were angry. And so they started to throw stones at him. And he actually got hit in the face and his glasses broke. But the crowd was angry because Serbia, although it has recognized that something happened at Srebrenica, has at that time at least did not call it a genocide. So it's still, you can see there's a lot of ethnic tensions in Bosnia and in all places around the former Yugoslavia, unfortunately. So the wars began after the fall of the main unifier, Tito, and the collapse of the Federal Communist Party, which allowed nationalism to reemerge. And then first Croatia and Slovenia were the battlegrounds, but the bloodiest was Beja, or Bosnia and Herzegovina. And at first they thought about 200,000 people were killed, but it was really around 100,000. But the crisis created over 2 million refugees and internally displaced persons. Afterwards came the Kosovo crisis, but by that point the international community took action more quickly. And horrific atrocities occurred on all sides, although the Serbs are usually the ones that are known for what happened. So I guess, yeah, so this is a question and answer session. So please type any questions you have about these countries into the chat. This is me in Sarajevo. Hungary, Austria, and former Yugoslavia are up for questions. It can be anything what kind of food they have there, or, if you want to get more in depth, you can, but it really can be anything. These are just a couple of pictures of Austria and Hungary. So, yeah.
How about you say maybe some of your favorite things about living in Hungary or Austria?
Okay, sure. So I studied abroad in Austria, in Vienna, during the fall of my sophomore year. So it was in 2015, actually, after I studied abroad in Bosnia. And Vienna is a really nice place. It's very multicultural community. A lot of different ethnicities and people live there from around the world, but it's still very classically Austrian. There's a lot of high culture, as they call it, with operas and concerts and cathedrals and all these things is really cool. But my favorite part about it was that you just have all types of people living there. Hungary, on the other hand, is, I guess, a little closer to my heart just because I am Hungarian and my family lives there. It's more politically controversial, but we don't have to talk about that. It's a beautiful country, though, and has a lot of history of its own to offer as well. And these two countries, Austria and Hungary, were, of course, connected and together during the Habsburg Empire, starting from 1848, and they play into the former Yugoslavia as well because it was a part of them, I guess, it was an annexed territory. So yeah, I don't know. There's all kinds of things that I like about all of these countries, to be honest. I will say that so Austria is probably one of the most beautiful countries in the world, in my opinion. And I wasn't really expecting, like, I didn't know what to expect when I went to Bosnia or the former Yugoslavia, but I think Bosnia is definitely up there. The geography is gorgeous, and it's just a fascinating place to be in terms of like politics and other things, which of course as a poli-sci major I'm interested in. Hungary too is very nice. A lot of great food there. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite foods from both countries or popular foods?
Okay, so probably the most popular food from Austria is Wiener Schnitzel, I would think. It's like in Vienna, it's basically like, it can be like a pork or venison, like fried thing, and it's eaten with Kartoffelsalat or potato salad with like vinegar, which is super good. Hungary is known primarily for its goulash, which is like this really thick stew with like beef and carrots and potatoes, and it's really like a lot of spices. But like Hungarian cooking is known for its use of paprika, which is like a spice, and it's primarily exported from Szeged down here. By the way, my family lives here, which is like right by Austria, maybe like an hour away from Vienna. But in Bosnia, let's see, the most popular food probably, or maybe the most well-known food, is called cevapi, which is like pita bread almost, but it's like better than pita bread with like little sausages on the inside, and you can eat it with like hot peppers and like these sauces or like sour cream. It's very good. But Bosnia also has really good like pies, so like spinach pies or like cheese pies, and they're fantastic. So I don't know, there's a lot of good eating that you can do in these places.
What are some popular sports? Popular sports.
Oh, popular sports. Let's see. Popular sports would probably, it depends on the country. So I can definitely answer to Hungary. In Hungary, there's water polo. Water polo is really popular, and we're pretty good at it, actually. Like in the Olympics, we tend to get to the finals, or we've won like gold medals in the past. So water polo is a big sport in Hungary. Soccer also, but the Hungarian soccer team is not so good. So you're usually cheering on like Real Madrid or someone, you know, from around, or Bayern München. Yeah, but so soccer and water polo. Austria too, I think soccer is a big deal. I don't know as much about Bosnia and the former Yugoslav countries, to be honest, about sports. But I can imagine that soccer just being a very like big deal in Europe is probably a big deal there as well.
Is American music popular there, or any music?
So in terms of music, let's see. So you hear music from all over. In Austria, particularly, it's American music is played in all of these countries, just on their like radio stations. But music from around like Europe is also played, particularly Great Britain, like in the UK. However, like there are like French musicians that are played, and Germans, and like in these specific countries, especially like in Hungary, I know, like Hungarian artists are also played on the radio. So there's like a good mix of different songs and different types of music, but like famous songs, especially from the US, are played like a lot. There's just a lot of different things that you would hear on the radio. But like if you go out to like so like bars and like dancing and clubbing and stuff is particularly enjoyed in Eastern Europe. You hear all kinds of music, and a lot of American songs are played as well. But they're more like upbeat songs.
What are the differences or similarities with technology or social media?
That's a good question. Okay, so technology and social media. So I can answer more for Austria and Hungary in this than Bosnia and the former Yugoslavia, just because I've spent more time in the former countries. So I guess I'll take a stab at those rather than former Yugoslavia, because I don't want to be saying something that's wrong. But relative, I mean, pretty much all of the like technology that we have is available there. It's just not as widespread. So you can see people using like iPhones and stuff, but it's very expensive, especially in Hungary and even in Austria, to like have an iPhone. It's a lot more expensive than here. I mean, it's expensive here as well, but like it's just not as common, I guess, that you would see. And in terms of like social media, Instagram and like Facebook and Twitter are all like there and you can use them. However, there are also like national like versions of it. So like in Hungary, there's like a Hungarian Facebook called Eviv, and like people use these, but they're more so on the like like the actual Facebook. But yeah, people use social media a lot. Like I have a cousin in Hungary, in Csenga, and she uses Instagram a lot. And so like, and a lot of people do. So it's a pretty commonplace thing. And of course, like laptops and computers are very common too. But mainly among like the younger generations. So kind of a funny story is that my grandparents in Hungary just recently got a laptop. So I'm very happy about that because we can Skype and it's easier to contact them. But they're not as like social media savvy as most people in Hungary.
What are the differences in like clothing or fashion, either modern or traditional?
Between the U.S. and
Austria or Hungary? Is there any difference in what people wear?
Yeah, so in terms of clothing, Europeans are generally viewed as being like maybe more formal in their dress. It's probably a good way to say it, like in everyday life. So like you wouldn't really see someone like in Austria or in Vienna walking around in like gym shorts just to walk around in. Like that's not really a thing, but yeah, they're usually more formal. In terms of like traditional clothing, it's very different. I should have probably included some pictures of that, but there's definitely like this like kind of like traditional folk style of clothing in all of these countries. And so yeah, there's definitely that. But like in terms of like modern day style in Bosnia, for instance, of course, like the people who are Bosniaks, they, dress differently, maybe more conservatively. The women, especially, their heads covered. And yeah, I don't know. It's pretty good. I mean, the clothing, but usually the younger people, like in these countries, are more like fashionable, kind of just, I guess, in general. And the older people, like especially the elderly, like don't really dress up as much. But yeah, I mean, you can get like all kinds of stuff there. So there's like H&M in like all these countries and big fashion like names and stuff. So.
How is movies or TV different, or American movies and TV?
So in terms of film, there are American movies that come in like the theaters and even on TV, but they're usually dubbed. So especially in Hungary, which means that there are Hungarian actors speaking over like the English so that you don't hear the English, but you hear the Hungarian. And then obviously there are movies that are just like subtitled in the language. Yeah, I don't know. So in Bosnia, I remember Jurassic World came out when I was there, and they were playing it, all over. So, but it was in Serbo-Croatian. It wasn't in English. But yeah, they have pretty much the same movies that come out, or the big ones, like the blockbusters. And they also have movies from like other countries as well, like Germany or Great Britain, places like that play in the movie theaters. And on TV as well. And there are a lot of like imported television shows. So there are like some American shows, but like also from Turkey or Italy. They're like soap operas and stuff, all kinds of things to watch. But, yeah.
I think we're just out of time.
Sure. So anyway, my last slide is just a big thank you. Thank you guys for listening. I know this is a really complicated topic, and I'm sure like there's just, so it's intense, but thank you guys for listening, and I hope that this was informative and like a good experience. So yeah.